Hello, my name is Alexander Borschel, and this is the Marshall Borschel channel. I just want to welcome you guys again to the podcast. I'm starting them up again now that I have a little bit more free time. And today I wanted to talk about perseverance and indomitable spirit. In a way, they're different tenets, but in a way, they're also tied together. And I think on this podcast, and I'll try to make it brief, I'd like to focus on the connection that they share. Now, when someone begins martial arts, presumably with a clear mind, let's say a white belt or a no belt, they've never done the arts before. They metaphorically are beginning to walk down that path. I've always likened black belt as a good, just kind of status quo. Not that a black belt actually represents true skill half the time, unfortunately. A black belt is at the end of that path to getting to the mountain, and the black belt is when you begin to actually climb the echelons of that mountain. And you'll never reach the top. There's just no level of ultimate mastery, Dragon Ball Z style, God style. It just doesn't work like that. The most that any martial artist can hope for is to do the best they can. I say that having won tournaments. I say that having lost tournaments. I say that having gotten second place in a tournament and the first place winner giving me their trophy because they felt I did a better kata than they did. Honesty and integrity is important in martial arts, but a martial career can last for a short period of time, but once you put on that white belt, in a certain sense, you never really stop being a martial artist. Perhaps you give it up or turn your back to it, but I don't want to say it's a commitment, but at a certain point, martial arts begins as a way of self-defense, as a way of becoming a good fighter. The focus these days is being the best fighter, and I don't necessarily agree with that because, in my experience, I've seen pro fighters lose to people they don't deserve to. I've seen people who you wouldn't believe win in a fight, multiples, fighting multiple people, even as a beginner, and they overcame. So you can never really know in a tournament setting how things are going to go, and this is rather representative of real life. In my first on exam in Cheongdaekwon at Khan's Academy, I learned it took years for me to understand what exactly the process was doing. At first, I thought it was evaluative. It was about seeing what I can do, and in a way, that testing was. But the actual part of the test that was important was the sparring. The 1-on-1 for a minute, the 1-on-2 for a minute, the 1-on-3 for a minute, the 1-on-4 for a minute. A black belt isn't actually made. This is a misconception. We can train every technique to perfection, but that doesn't actually make a black belt. A black belt is just a metaphor. We're talking about someone who has gone past that practicing stage of martial artist to actually being able to utilize that martial arts. And this is an important distinction because when you go down to the dojo and you go to the tournament, that doesn't mean that you can necessarily use it to survive on the street. And this is important in where indomitable spirit comes into play and brings me back to that exam. That exam was about being having the living bejesus beaten out of you. But to fail it was there's no winning in such a fight. Even if you could beat 10 people at once, you still lost because you got in a fight. There's just that fact of matter of life. The point of that exercise was that if you're cornered and the odds are against you, at least you have a chance of surviving if you fight. And that's perseverance. You might get the living bejesus kicked out of you. It might even change your life and your physicality. But the black belt spirit, the martial spirit, is one that will do that will confront that. And that indomitable spirit in that perseverance is what will allow you to overcome those trials. There's no winning and losing in a fight, maybe in a tournament, maybe But I can't say that there's winning it or losing in a street fight when somebody attacks you in real life. So I don't want to give that misconception. Perseverance is when you go beyond what you thought you could do. Indomitable spirit is reaching within yourself into a part you may never have known existed and bringing it forth. And once you bring it forth, there's no way you can turn it off, but it's always there. And part of the process of that brutal exam was to break someone into the point of, I don't want to say cornering them into being desperate to fight, but to bring that fight out of the person so that they have a chance to actually survive on the street. I first came from a Olympic style school. I wouldn't call it a McDojo, but the next school that I attended in Taekwondo, its focus was not just on self-defense, but on pragmatic self-defense and what to do when you're absolutely screwed. And this, in many ways, is something that every martial artist should aspire for. Yes, there are times when we lose in fights. There are times when we have to tap out. There are times where we get injured and we have to take breaks. But the indomitable spirit is waiting for that recovery time, fighting that opponent that you don't think you can win, and giving it your all. So I just wanted to make this video about the importance of those tenets in at least Taekwondo, but in my personal opinion, in martial arts overall. Because without it, you can't really say that you have effectively learned to use your martial arts. It's that argument of knowing something versus wisdom. You can know how to do something, but wisdom is actually doing it. Now, you can test that to a limited degree within tournaments, and it's a great way to do so, but in the real world, there aren't that rule set. So you have to keep in mind that martial arts will prepare you for a lot. But the more important parts are that there comes a certain point where it's no longer about fighting. It's about becoming better with what you have as who you are. I don't want to get into some kind of super spiritual side of this, but ultimately there comes a transition where your teacher will look at you as a peer. You will always honor them, but you can drink a beer with them. You can spar with them. You can hang out with them. They become friends. You don't just walk with them ahead of you as a guide. You walk together. And I think a lot of people in martial arts forget that the ultimate goal of this is self-improvement so that we can pass it on to others. Our indomitable spirit is what inspires others to have their own and cultivate it. So I just wanted to leave you guys with those thoughts. Perseverance is overcoming those trials in life that you thought perhaps otherwise you may not have been able to do so. I've seen plenty of fights won because of perseverance. And I've also seen plenty of fights won because of indomitable spirit. I'm a tiny guy. I've won a few fights in my lifetime, even outside of tournaments. I've even used it to protect others. I'm a tiny guy, but at the end of the day, we have to have that indomitable spirit or we can't call ourselves martial artists truly. So I just want to thank you guys for your attention. I apologize for the long-running video, and I hope that this was a worthwhile conversation for you all. Thank you for listening.